The Todd Pletcher and Mike Rapoli horse in the Belmont Stakes, you got to take Uncaged seriously. Let's talk about him. Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and here with the Belmont Stakes Contender Spotlight Series video on Uncaged, a late entry into the Belmont Stakes, just announced a couple of days before the official draw. And so we're going to dive into this very interesting runner. But before we do, I want to encourage you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. Listen, we got a lot of great content here for you, and we got you covered for Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, Saratoga in the summer, Breeders' Cup in the fall, all year round. So like I said, make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. All right. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit about Uncaged. And like I said, he was a late decision to be entered into this race. Looked like it was going to be a 6-horse field. Then you started hearing murmurings. You started hearing Mike Rapoli, the owner, talk a little bit more about, hey, maybe we enter a horse like Uncaged. You can't win if you don't enter, right? So he decides he's going to enter Uncaged. Now, interestingly enough, Todd Pletcher decides to enter another horse as well late in the game, Crudo, who, if you have not watched that Contender Spotlight series, you can certainly do so now here on NYRA Bets. But when we're talking about Uncaged, it's interesting. He's a horse coming off a very disappointing effort last time out in the Wood Memorial, finished sixth in the Peter Pan, finished sixth in that race, well behind Hill Road. But there's some interesting notes that I think accompany that effort that we're going to get into, that maybe there's a little bit of an asterisk. And yes, he's 30-1 in the morning line. He's a huge price, but maybe, just maybe, he might show a little bit more than you might expect come Saturday. Well, let's talk about Uncaged. Like I said, the trainer, Todd Pletcher, as good as it gets at stretching horses out. When you think about the Belmont Stakes, you often think about Todd Pletcher. His name is kind of synonymous with the Belmont in a lot of ways, not just because he's based here in New York, but because he's had so much success in this race specifically. And Uncaged is a horse that will be stretching out, but there's a lot of pedigree to like there in terms of sired by Curlin and out of a Pioneer of the Nile mare. So again, from a pedigree standpoint, whenever you have Curlin up top, you figure this is a horse that should be able to relish and appreciate going that 1.25 mile distance for this year's Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. Jockeyed by Luis Saez. Making a little bit of a change here. Kendrick Carmouche was up last time out in that Peter Pan, and now Louis hops up on the mount here. And like I said, finished sixth that day in the Peter Pan, which was his first attempt at a graded stakes race. Did win a $100,000 optional claimer. The more important element of this, perhaps, or maybe the most important element, is that he broke his maiden in debut at Saratoga last summer. So this is a horse that had success at this track, clearly likes the surface. So maybe there's something there with a horse like that. But nevertheless, Uncaged, like I said, a very interesting horse to talk about because he's lightly raced, much like a stablemate Crudo, who we discussed earlier. He's a horse that, again, only 4 career starts. Now, what's promising is the Lasix question. He actually broke his maiden without Lasix over a muddy sealed track at Saratoga, going 6 furlongs. And that to date is actually his best buyer speed figure of an 84. He went to the bench for a while, from August until March. Todd showed a lot of patience with this horse, brought him back in a $75,000 optional claimer down there, finished 4th that day off the bench. You maybe wouldn't have expected much else. Then brings him up here to Aqueduct. He does a 1-turn mile, runs a real nice race with the assistance of Lasix. Kendrick aboard, comes from well off the pace and really showed you something, I think, even though the speed figure came back a little light in 81. And he thought, well, maybe he can take a big step forward in that Peter Pan. And just didn't really, got away fine and was kind of in an okay position, on paper. But that's where there's a big difference between how you see a horse run on paper versus how you see him run on the track. And going the 2 turns, I don't think was an issue. But Kendrick said after the race to Todd, I don't think the horse liked being inside. I don't think the horse liked the kickback so much. And Kendrick said, if I had to do it over again, I'd probably keep him in the clear. I think he would have run a little bit better. I think he was agitated getting, having all that thrown in his face. Now, that's not necessarily great news to hear for the Belmont. Why? Well, he's not fast enough to get to the lead. I'll tell you that. But maybe he can lay in a 4th or 5th position. He's certainly faster early than horses like Sovereignty or Hill Road and a Heart of Honor. But he's not as fast as a stablemate. He's nowhere near fast as Rodriguez. He's not as fast as Journalism or Baeza in all likelihood. So, 4th, maybe 5th. maybe fourth or fifth at the worst, is where he's going to be sitting early on. And he drew post position 4. So there's a chance he's going to be inside again. It'll be interesting to see how Louis tries to keep him in the clear because, like I said, based off those comments from Kendrick, which Todd then passed along to the press, which makes you think that Todd, kind of had some belief in this and maybe really does think this horse needs to run a little bit more just in the clear. Doesn't need to be up front, but just needs to be in the clear. And, maybe it was just also an educational effort, something where, hey, the horse experienced it once and didn't necessarily love it, but, something now he's a little bit more familiar, might not, agitate him as much next time around. So Uncaged would need to take a massive step forward from a buyer speed figure standpoint. If you're looking at what he's coming off of in that Peter Pan, he would need to get at least 20 points faster in this race. So I think you have any sort of a shot at making an impact. I think you probably are going to end up needing 100 plus buyer speed figure to win this race. But if you're running 99, sure, you might be third or fourth. But again, that's the sort of effort he would need to put in to really put himself in the conversation for the Belmont Stakes and for hitting the board. But like I said, the pedigree's there. He's got this off the pace running style. I think it might be best suited at one turn, just because you get a little bit more pace in those races. Certainly, it helps that his stablemate Crudo's in the race. But again, Crudo's the more highly regarded of these two. So it's not as if Crudo was entered to help set things up for Uncaged. Yeah, if anything, it should be the other way around in terms of, not that, if you flip their running styles around, it would make more sense. That if Uncaged was more of the rabbit and Crudo was more of the closer, or mid-pack horse, then that would make a little bit more sense. But again, I don't think there's any gamesmanship with this in terms of Crudo being entered to help Uncaged. I think Crudo's being entered because there's no other speed in the race outside of Rodriguez, and Crudo's pedigree absolutely supports a mile and a quarter, and Todd thinks he's got a real shot. So Uncaged, I think, again, some of this is Mike Rapoli, and I say that not, I know I joke around a lot about Rapoli, but I say that not in a derogatory or negative way at all. Mike Rapoli looked at the Belmont Stakes and didn't want to have a 6-horse field. And he said, listen, I'm going to enter one of my horses. I'm going to take a shot, a horse that I have a lot of promise in, a $450,000 sale. The pedigree would suggest he can do 2 turns in a mile and a quarter. Something, maybe he just didn't like the experience last time out. Maybe the first time doing 2 turns was a little too much, but Todd's got a couple more weeks in him now. He's able to get him straightened up, and we're going to take a shot with him in this race. Rapoli even joked at the time, because at the time it was going to be potentially a 7-horse field with Uncaged in. He joked, I guarantee a top 7 result. So again, there's a little bit of humor there with this horse. But again, 30-1 tied for the longest shot on the morning line with Heart of Honor. It would certainly be a surprise. It would be a huge surprise if Uncaged won this race, simply because he's going to have to outclose a horse like Journalism or Baeza, or get the jump and hold off a horse like Sovereignty and Hill Road. And I don't see either of those scenarios happening. So again, could he take a huge step forward? Sure. And these horses absolutely can. He's only raced 4 times. So he could absolutely move forward. The thing is, he would have to make a massive move forward to make a huge impact. So can he make that much of a move forward? I don't know. Maybe you want to include him in a superfecta if you're wanting to get cute with things and, go, hey, maybe you can pick up the pieces if some of these horses don't want the mile and a quarter. But we know a lot of them do want the mile and a quarter. We know Journalism wants a mile and a quarter. We know Sovereignty wants a mile and a quarter. We know Baeza wants a mile and a quarter. So we know 3 of these horses can do that distance without any trouble. And, I think a horse like Hill Road probably wants a mile and a quarter. I think you look at a horse like Crudo probably wants a mile and a quarter. I think he's absolutely a horse that can do that distance. So listen, Uncaged, he's won at Saratoga before. He's won off Lasix before. Those are the positives. He's got a great pedigree. The negatives, he needs to get a lot faster, coming off a poor effort. And I'm not entirely sure his running style is what is going to be best at 2 turns, even if his pedigree, from a standpoint of stamina, should be able to support 2 turns. So listen, Uncaged, like I said, a big long shot, but certainly one you might want to consider using in your deeper exotics. I'm not probably going to be including him in any way, shape, or form in a lot of my wagers. But again, up to you and what you see from a horse like Uncaged. All right. Well, listen, folks, I hope you enjoyed this Belmont Stakes Spotlight preview on Uncaged. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe. My name is Matthew DeSantis, reminding you to have a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.